The Lonely Valley rest stop, a quiet oasis on a long stretch of deserted road, was about to become the scene of an unexpected drama. Gabriel Torres, a veteran ex-Marine hardened by years of service, stopped for a short break and a hot coffee. Little did he know that he was about to face a situation completely different from those of his combat days. As he looked at the place, his eyes fell on a little girl with brown skin and a serious-looking older man. Immediately, a silent alert went off inside him, that sharp intuition that only years of training can give. Something was off. However, in a world where appearances can be deceiving, Gabriel knew he had to be safe before acting. But what danger could be hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary scene? The afternoon progressed, and the sun began to dye the sky with golden tones, casting long shadows on the asphalt. The rest area stood alone in the middle of the fields, offering a brief break to exhausted travelers. The modest construction housed a small restaurant and a convenience store, an ideal stop to recharge on a long trip. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was calm and relaxed. The hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the soft clinking of cutlery and occasional murmurs. The somewhat worn plastic booths told stories of countless visitors who had stopped there over the years. Near the entrance, a coffee station was ready, with the coffee maker still half-baked and smoking, while a row of vending machines vibrated gently in one corner. The door of the place opened, letting in a gust of fresh air, and some eyes were raised to observe the newcomer. Gabriel entered the premises, evaluating the space with the efficiency and caution that military training had instilled in him. Although he was back on American soil, the habits formed in the service did not disappear so easily. His gaze swept over the few present, 2 truck drivers bent over their steaming cups of coffee, an old woman slowly enjoying a cake, and a middle-aged man in a suit engrossed in his newspaper. It was then that he noticed a small figure sitting in a yellow booth by the window, a girl no more than 8 years old, sitting across from the man in a suit. Her dark skin contrasted with the vibrant blue dress she wore, and her curls framed a face that seemed lost in thought. Something in the girl's posture made Gabriel stop. Its large eyes looked around nervously, not landing anywhere for a long time. His little hands writhed in his lap, occasionally rising to cover his face, as if to hide from something that was not visible to the naked eye. The man in front of her, meanwhile, seemed to be in his 50s. His greying hair was neatly combed, and his dark blue suit looked impeccable. He held the newspaper aloft, creating a kind of barrier between him and the girl, but Gabriel noticed that, from time to time, his eyes peered over the newspaper, watching the little girl with an intensity that seemed out of place. While waiting for his coffee at the counter, Gabriel couldn't get it out of his head that something wasn't right. The age difference and the obvious contrast between the girl and the man could have an innocent explanation, he reminded himself. Perhaps she was adopted, or the man was a family friend. However, the girl's discomfort and the man's controlled posture kept him uneasy. Gabriel decided to position himself near the vending machines, a strategic place from where he could observe without raising suspicion. With his cup in hand, his gaze returned to the pair by the window. The girl looked at him for a moment, and in that split second, Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. There was a deep emotion in his eyes, something that went beyond shyness or tiredness. As the minutes passed, Gabriel began to observe subtle patterns. The girl drummed her fingers on the table in a mute rhythm, her feet dangling without reaching the floor, swaying slowly. Every now and then she glanced at the man, looking away quickly when she noticed that he was watching her too. The man, for his part, maintained a tense calm, alternating between his newspaper and the girl, as if trying to appear calm that was not genuine. As he continued to watch, Gabriel noticed a small gesture on the girl's hand, a slight raising of the palm, fingers open. The action was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it caught Gabriel's attention immediately. He frowned, trying to decipher the meaning behind that movement. Was it a nervous tic, or a desperate attempt at communication? The girl's gaze met Gabriel's again, and in that split second, a spark of fear and despair flashed through her eyes. Though it lasted only an instant, it left Gabriel with a growing sense of unease. His military training began to kick in, his mind racing through possible scenarios. That gesture from the girl seemed intentional, a deliberate action, perhaps a silent sign of help when words were dangerous. Gabriel's pulse began to quicken as he contemplated the possibility that the girl really was in danger. The apparent tranquility of the place contrasted with the tension he felt growing inside him. As I watched, I tried to rationalize the situation. Perhaps he was just a family man, a close friend, or a relative who just looked a little stern. Yet every instinct in his body, honed by years of service, screamed at him not to ignore his suspicions. Gabriel decided to wait a little longer, watching from his position near the vending machines, taking small sips of his coffee and trying not to attract attention. The girl, meanwhile, continued with her nervous behavior, her eyes moving around the premises and her hands making the same gesture with her palm raised and her fingers apart. When the waiter handed him a sandwich, Gabriel stayed in the counter area a little longer than necessary, looking for an excuse to stay in the place without looking suspicious. Finally, he decided to approach the girls' and the man's table, pretending that he was just evaluating the place. The girl noticed his closeness, and her eyes reflected a mixture of hope and fear, as if she was assessing whether she could trust him. Gabriel realized that he had to handle the situation carefully. If your suspicions were wrong, intervening could create an unnecessary misunderstanding. However, if he was right, that little girl's life could depend on his next decision. He decided to stay close, always observing without being obvious. The girl raised her palm again, her fingers spread apart in a subtle gesture. But this time, Gabriel had no doubts. This was a call for help. I had seen similar signs before, in combat zones, the silent gestures of soldiers caught in risky situations. Gabriel decided to act, but not impulsively. Instead of directly confronting the man, he discreetly pulled out his phone and dialed 911. He spoke in a low, calm tone, describing the situation to the operator, offering the key details: a dark-skinned girl of about 8 in a blue dress, and an older man accompanying her, grey-haired and in a dark blue suit. "I'm not completely sure, but there's something about the situation that doesn't seem right," he explained seriously. His calm and concise tone caused the operator to assure him that a patrol would be sent. While waiting, Gabriel kept his position near the vending machines, still watching the couple. Seeing that the man began to move as if he was going to get up, Gabriel felt that he must buy some time. His mind worked quickly, devising an excuse to intervene without alerting the man. He decided to approach, simulating a casual and friendly attitude. "Good evening," he said, looking at the man. "Do you know if this place has an ATM machine? I need to get some cash." The man looked up, surprised and somewhat tense. "No, I don't think so," he replied in a dry voice, but trying to appear calm. Gabriel took the opportunity to look at the girl. "Hello, are you okay?" he asked softly, addressing her with a serene expression. The girl looked at him, her eyes expressing deep fear mixed with faint hope. However, before he could answer, the man quickly intervened. "She's fine. She's just a little tired," he said, trying to sound carefree. Gabriel felt his distrust increase when he noticed the interruption. With a subtle gesture, he stepped back, maintaining his composure and returning to his previous, ever-vigilant position. A few minutes passed in silence, and Gabriel began to wonder how long it would take for the authorities to arrive. Finally, he heard the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance. The tension in her chest eased somewhat, but she remained alert, knowing that the real challenge was about to begin. He watched as the man tensed, his eyes staring toward the door with growing uneasiness. Gabriel mentally prepared himself for whatever was necessary, willing to protect the girl if the situation required it. Seeing 2 police officers enter the restaurant, Gabriel felt a mixture of relief and determination. He knew that the arrival of the police meant that the situation was about to unravel, and that he would have to explain his suspicions clearly. But, more importantly, she knew that her decision to trust her intuition could have made all the difference in that little girl's life. The police officers entered the restaurant with firm steps, observing the scene and quickly assessing those present. Gabriel approached them with calculated calmness, keeping his voice low as he briefly explained what he had observed. He described the girl's behavior and the man's vigilant attitude. noting how the girl had raised her hand in a gesture that he interpreted as a distress signal. One of the officers nodded, listening intently. After a brief exchange of glances, both agents went to the table where the girl and the man were. Gabriel stayed close, not far away, ready to intervene if necessary. "Good evening, sir," one of the policemen said, his tone professional but friendly. "Could we ask you some questions?" The man, Enrique, flashed a tense smile, trying to appear calm. "Sure, any official problem?" he replied, looking quickly at the girl, as if trying to control her with his eyes. "We're doing a routine check in the area just to make sure everything is in order," the officer explained, directing a brief glance at the girl. "Are you here with your daughter?" Enrique hesitated for a moment before answering, visibly uncomfortable. Yes, it's my niece. I'm in charge of it for a while," he said, trying to keep his composure. The officer nodded, but his eyes turned to the girl, who was still with her head down, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Is that true, little girl? Are you okay?" he asked softly. The girl, Lucia, looked up at the officer and then looked at Gabriel. The hope in her eyes was evident, though she seemed caught between fear and the possibility that someone would finally help her. For a moment his voice broke, but he managed to whisper an answer. "No, I'm not well," he murmured, barely a thin voice. Harry, upon hearing his words, tried to soften the situation. "She is very tired. It's been a long day," he said nervously, trying to get the officers to ignore the girl's words. But the police were not fooled. One of them placed himself on one side of the table, in a strategic position that blocked any possible exit for Enrique, while the other officer, adopting a calmer posture, continued to talk to Lucia. "Do you want us to help you, Lucia?" "You are safe with us," he assured her in a tone that conveyed confidence. The girl nodded slowly, a gesture that sealed the officer's suspicions and confirmed what Gabriel had feared all along. With a hand sign, Henry's closest officer asked him to get up. "Lord, we need you to come with us to clear up some things," he said firmly. "What? This is ridiculous!" Enrique tried to protest, his tone oscillating between indignation and growing nervousness. "I haven't done anything wrong. She's my niece, and I'm just taking care of her." The police were not intimidated. "If you really haven't done anything wrong, you'll have no problem answering a few questions at the police station," one of the officers replied as he placed himself in a defensive position, ready to react if Enrique tried to escape. Tension could be felt in the air, and Gabriel remained alert, watching Enrique's nervous gestures. Finally, one of the policemen took Lucia by the hand and pulled her away from the table, leading her to a safe area in the restaurant while the other officer was in charge of escorting Enrique to the exit. As the officer accompanied Lucia, she turned her head and gave Gabriel a look, who returned a warm smile and a slight nod of approval, silently assuring her that she was now safe. Gabriel, sensing that the immediate danger had passed, let out the air he had been holding. Although his suspicions had proved true, the relief of knowing that the girl was out of danger gave him immense comfort. I knew that the next few moments would be crucial to clarify the whole situation. Outside, the lights of the patrol cars illuminated the restaurant's parking lot in a play of red and blue flashes. The officers escorted Enrique to one of the vehicles, while he continued to insist on his innocence, claiming that it was all a misunderstanding. However, his apparent control began to crumble with each step, his voice cracked, and his posture showed the tension of someone who knows that his farce is coming to an end. Lucia, meanwhile, was inside the restaurant, under the care of an officer who had adopted a calm, protective tone to make her feel safe. The girl was silent, still trembling, her eyes fixed on the ground. Gabriel, watching the scene from a short distance, approached her, crouching down at her level to speak softly to her. "Lucia, everything is fine now," he said in a low tone but full of warmth. "The cops are here to help you." The girl looked up, showing a mixture of relief and vulnerability. Tears began to roll down his cheeks as he slowly assimilated that the danger had passed. With a trembling voice, he managed to articulate a few words. "Thank you. I thought no one was going to help me." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat at the sincerity of his gratitude. The courage that the girl had shown in trying to ask for help silently in such an intimidating situation was touching to her. One of the officers approached Gabriel, interrupting the moment with a respectful expression on his face. "Mr. Torres, we need you to come with us to the police station to take an official statement. You were instrumental in alerting us, and possibly saving this child." Gabriel nodded, understanding that his speech was not over. There were still questions to be answered and details to be clarified, but before leaving he turned to Lucia, who was looking at him with those big eyes, full of gratitude. "I'm going to go to the officers to make sure you're okay? They will take care of everything, and soon you will be able to be with someone in your family who really loves and takes care of you," Gabriel assured her, trying to convey the tranquility she needed so much. Lucia nodded, and although her body still reflected the tension of the experience, she seemed more relaxed, sure that she was surrounded by people who really wanted to protect her. As the officers led Enrique to the patrol, his attempts to defend himself became increasingly desperate. "They don't understand! This is all a misunderstanding," he shouted, his words losing strength to the determination of the officers leading him to the police vehicle. The tension in the parking lot was beginning to dissipate, replaced by a sense of calm and resolution. Gabriel, watching as the policemen prepared to leave, felt the weight on his chest finally lighten. He had trusted his instincts, and that decision had been crucial. Moments later, Gabriel got into his own vehicle and set out to follow the patrols to the police station to complete the formal process. As he drove, his thoughts returned to the moment he decided to stop at that restaurant. That fortuitous rest had resulted in a chain of events that, although unexpected, had allowed him to protect an innocent girl. When I arrived at the police station, the atmosphere was less chaotic, but the work continued diligently. Lucia was taken to a waiting room where a social services officer took care of making her comfortable while the officers dealt with the initial procedures. An agent approached Gabriel to begin taking his statement. Gabriel recounted every detail of what he had observed, from the girl's awkward behavior to the subtle gestures that had led him to suspect that something was not right. As he spoke, the officer took notes earnestly, thanking Gabriel for his intervention. "If it hadn't been for you," the officer remarked, looking up from his notebook, "we don't know how this would all have ended. Many people would have looked the other way, but you acted." Gabriel simply nodded humbly, remembering that he had done nothing more than what he felt was right. I knew that the decision to intervene wasn't always easy, but in this case it had made a difference. As they finished their statement, Lucia's father hurried to the police station, his face full of concern and relief. His gaze swept around the room until he found his daughter, who got up from her seat when she recognized him and ran towards him, letting out a sob as she threw herself into his arms. Lucia's father hugged her tightly, tears falling as he stroked his daughter's hair, which was still trembling in his arms. His voice cracked as he whispered words of comfort. "You're safe, Lucia. Everything is fine now. Dad is here with you." The girl, still in a state of shock, clung to him, seeking in his embrace the shelter she so desperately needed. Gabriel watched the meeting from a respectful distance, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. I knew that I had intervened at just the right time and that somehow I had prevented Lucia from going through something much worse. Despite being a stranger to this family, his decision to trust his intuition had made all the difference in their lives. One of the officers approached Lucia's father to speak to him privately. He explained the situation and how Gabriel had been the one who alerted the authorities about Enrique's suspicious behavior. The father listened intently, nodding as his expression shifted between surprise and gratitude. Then he looked up at Gabriel, walking toward him with Lucia by his side, still clinging to his hand. The father stretched out his hand firmly, his eyes full of gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for words," he said, his voice breaking. "If you hadn't been there, I don't even want to imagine what could have happened." Gabriel shook his hand humbly, answering simply, "I did what I had to do. Sometimes the small details can say a lot, and I couldn't ignore what I saw." Lucia looked at Gabriel with large, grateful eyes. Although it was still difficult for her to express herself, his eyes spoke for her. "Thank you," he said in a whisper, his voice trembling but full of sincerity. Gabriel gave her a warm smile and ruffled her hair gently, trying to make her feel safe. The social services officer who was in charge of Lucia approached to take her to a private room where they could ask her some routine questions in the company of her father. Before they left, Lucia's father turned to Gabriel again. "Please let me invite you to our house this weekend. I would love for you to get to know Lucia better and for you to feel part of our family. After what you did for us, it's the least I can offer." Gabriel hesitated for a moment, uncomfortable with the idea of receiving thanks. But seeing the sincerity in the man's eyes, he nodded with a faint smile. "It's okay, I'll be there." The father nodded, visibly moved, and took Lucia by the hand, leaving her in a safe environment with the support team. As Gabriel watched them walk away, he felt that he had fulfilled an important mission, although this time not in a combat zone, but in an everyday environment. That night, as he returned home, Gabriel thought about how unexpected the chain of events had been that led him to cross paths with that family. It had been a reminder that, even in civilian life, sometimes reflexes and a willingness to protect others could make a real difference. Gabriel watched the scene from a distance, allowing himself a sigh of relief at the family gathering. Despite everything she had experienced, there was an ending in which Lucia, at least, would be safe with someone who would protect her from now on. Days later, on a quiet afternoon, Gabriel arrived at the house of Lucia's father, whose name he learned was Daniel. The house was modest but cozy, with a flower-filled garden that added colour and life to the environment. As he approached the door, he took a deep breath, ready to share a special moment with the family he barely knew, but with whom he already felt an unexpected bond. Daniel opened the door with a warm smile and invited him into the backyard, where they had prepared a small gathering in Gabriel's honour. There was a festive atmosphere, with the grill lit and the aroma of roast meat filling the air. A small group of close friends and family members chatted animatedly as the children ran around the garden. In the midst of the laughter and talk, Lucia spotted him and ran towards him with a shy but genuine smile. "Gabriel, come. Look what Dad prepared," she said, pointing to a table decorated with balloons and some drawings she had made herself. Gabriel smiled and followed, being surprised by the warmth of the welcome. As Lucia led him by the hand, Daniel came over and placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "I wanted you to come not only to thank you, but also to tell you a little more about our history. After all, you're a part of it now," Daniel said, his voice filled with suppressed emotion. They made their way to a quiet corner of the courtyard where they could converse privately. Daniel looked out over the garden, where Lucia was happily playing with other children. "It hasn't been easy," he began. "A few months ago, after a complicated separation, the court awarded me custody of Lucia, his mother. I was not in a position to take care of her, but I could not accept it, and I didn't realize how much I was willing to risk to try to get her back." Gabriel nodded, understanding now why the situation had been so tense and dangerous. "Was Enrique involved with her?" she asked, wanting to understand more of the background. Daniel sighed, with an air of sadness in his eyes. "Yes, Enrique is her partner. Both were determined to take Lucia, even if it meant breaking the court's orders. They had plans to leave the country, to disappear without a trace." Daniel paused, looking at Gabriel gratefully. "Without you, they would have achieved their goal. They would have taken her out of the country, and I don't know if I would have seen her again." Gabriel felt a knot in his stomach when he heard those words. Although he had felt the urge to perform in the restaurant, he had not been able to imagine how close Lucia had come to getting lost in an uncertain fate. "I just did what anyone would have done," Gabriel said, uncomfortable with the attention. But Daniel shook his head. "No, Gabriel. Many would have ignored what you saw. They would have thought it was none of their business. But you acted. You followed your instinct, and that saved my daughter. Lucia is here, with me, because you made a decision at that moment." The conversation was silent for a few moments, each lost in thought. Gabriel, feeling the weight of Daniel's words, looked over to where Lucia was laughing and playing, full of life and carefreeness. It was hard to imagine that a few days ago that same girl was sitting in a restaurant, shrouded in fear and uncertainty. Daniel interrupted the silence with a slight smile. "And now I want you to be a part of our life. Lucia admires you. She has not stopped talking about you since that day. So, if that's okay with you, I'd love for you to come whenever you can. You are like part of our family." Gabriel nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in a while. That invitation and Daniel's warmth made him feel at home, something he hadn't felt in years. The rest of the afternoon was spent in an atmosphere of joy and tranquility. Gabriel shared stories with Daniel's friends and family, who welcomed him with genuine hospitality. Lucia, for her part, did not leave his side, showing him her toys and telling him about her drawings. As evening fell, as the sun began to tint the sky with golden hues, Daniel approached Gabriel once more. "Thank you for being here today. This is just the beginning of something good. Thanks to you, Lucia can grow up safely, with her family," he said with a smile of gratitude. Gabriel moved, nodded. He knew that this family was now a part of his life, and although the path that had led him to them had been unexpected, he was deeply grateful. As he said goodbye and headed to his car, Gabriel took one last look at the house, where Lucia was saying goodbye to him from the porch with her hand raised and a smile. She felt that that afternoon she had closed an important chapter in her life, and at the same time she had opened a new one full of meaning and human connection. Gabriel got into his car, started the engine, and began to slowly drive away from Daniel and Lucia's house. As he walked the way back, he couldn't help but remember the last few days and how that moment in the restaurant had led him to be part of the life of that family. A simple coffee at a rest stop had set off a series of events that reminded him of the importance of being alert and following his instinct, no matter how simple or everyday the environment seemed. As he drove, he reflected on how, since he had left military service, he had felt an emptiness, a disconnect from his purpose. He had left behind missions, combat, and a strong sense of protecting others, and while civilian life had given him peace of mind, he sometimes felt something was missing. However, that unexpected meeting with Lucia and Daniel reminded her that it was not necessary to be in a war zone to make a difference. Sometimes life offered opportunities to help others at the least expected times and places. During the days that followed, Daniel and Lucia kept in touch with Gabriel. They sent her messages, and from time to time, Lucia made drawings that Daniel sent her, such as photos, drawings full of colours and figures that represented the hero who had saved her. Gabriel smiled every time he received those messages, feeling deeply moved by the place he had occupied in the little girl's life. One afternoon, while he was at home, he received a call from Daniel. "Gabriel, I wanted to know if you have a moment to stop by. Lucia has been talking a lot about you, and I would like you to come over for dinner. Plus, we have something we want to give you as a token of appreciation." Gabriel accepted, feeling excited and honoured by the invitation. When he arrived, he was received with the same warmth as last time, and Lucia, excited, hugged him and showed him a new drawing that she had made especially for him. It was an illustration of the three of them together, smiling, under a sky full of stars. Seeing the drawing, Gabriel couldn't help but smile. Despite the hard experiences of his life, he had never felt such a strong connection with someone in such a short time. After a delicious dinner full of laughter and anecdotes, Daniel got up and returned with a small box which he put in Gabriel's hands. "This is for you," he said, his eyes reflecting gratitude and respect. Gabriel opened the box and found a wooden plaque with an engraved phrase. "To our unexpected hero, for following his instinct and giving us back peace." The words were simple, but each one had a special weight. Gabriel felt his throat close as he read the message, deeply moved by the gesture. "Thank you, Daniel. This means a lot to me," he muttered, unable to find enough words to express all that he felt. That night, while he said goodbye and drove back, the license plate rested on the passenger seat. He watched her out of the corner of his eye as he thought about how that simple object symbolized something he had never expected. The opportunity to find a new purpose in a life that until then had felt somewhat empty. He knew that this connection with Lucia and Daniel was special, and that, although they were not blood family, the bonds they had formed were as strong as any other. From that day on, Gabriel continued to visit Daniel and Lucia frequently. He would spend afternoons helping her with her homework, teaching her some games, and even sharing stories of her days in the military, stories full of learnings and experiences. Over time, the little girl began to see him not only as the man who had saved her, but also as a familiar figure, someone she could trust and feel safe with. As the months went by, Gabriel realized that this decision in the restaurant had not only saved Lucia, but had also given him back a purpose, a sense of belonging. I knew that I had found something irreplaceable in connecting with this family, and that even though life was always unpredictable, I could find satisfaction in the moments when I decided to act, in the moments when courage and instinct came together to make a difference. Over time, Gabriel became even more integrated into Lucia and Daniel's lives. The visits, which were at first occasional, became more frequent, and the connection that had emerged from that tense situation in the restaurant evolved into a genuine and deep friendship. One afternoon, while Gabriel and Daniel were talking in the yard while Lucia played near them, Daniel revealed something he had been keeping from the beginning. "You know, Gabriel, I never thought someone would help us like that. Lucia and I had been through difficult times, and it was not easy to trust that everything would turn out well. But your appearance was like an unexpected answer to my prayers." Gabriel nodded, reflecting silently. He knew that for Daniel, the situation with Lucia and her custody had been a road full of obstacles, and that the rescue at the restaurant had not only meant physical safety, but also emotional stability for both of them. Lucia approached them at that moment, interrupting their conversation with a big smile. "Gabriel, come and play," he asked, pulling him by the hand. Gabriel laughed and got up to follow her, letting himself be carried away by the joyful energy of the little girl. As he helped her swing, she looked at Daniel, who was watching them with a calm and happy expression, as if that moment was a reflection of the peace he had hoped for his daughter. With each visit, Gabriel realized that the relationship with Lucia and Daniel was helping him rediscover parts of himself that he thought he had left behind. Everyday life, shared laughter, and deep connection made him feel like he had found a kind of family, a connection that brought him purpose and renewed joy. One day, during a conversation with Lucia, the girl looked at him with bright eyes and said, "Gabriel, you're my hero, you know? If you hadn't been there, I would have felt very alone." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat at those words and smiled at her, touched by the sincerity of the little girl. He knew that even though the words were simple, they contained a profound truth that reaffirmed his decision to intervene. Over time, Gabriel continued to be a part of Lucia and Daniel's lives, keeping that unspoken promise of protection and friendship that had arisen at that critical moment. And although the path that had led him to them had been unexpected, he felt that he had now found something invaluable. In the months that followed, Gabriel became a constant figure in Lucia and Daniel's lives. Her visits were naturally integrated into her routine, and she soon felt like an essential part of the family. Little Lucia considered him not only as her hero, but also as a friend and mentor who filled every space he was in with warmth and security. One afternoon, while Gabriel was helping Lucia with a homework assignment, Daniel joined them at the dining room table. He looked at the scene with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "I've thought a lot about what happened that day at the restaurant," Daniel began quietly, "and I realized that you not only saved Lucia, but you gave us a chance to start over." Gabriel looked at him, nodding speechlessly. That moment at the restaurant had transformed more lives than he had imagined, and although at first he did not understand the scope of his actions, he was slowly discovering the impact of that single act of bravery. As they continued their conversation, Daniel explained that since the incident, he had made important decisions to protect his daughter's well-being. With the support of the authorities and a legal team, he managed to ensure that Lucia's custody was immovable. "I don't want anyone to threaten your peace of mind again," Daniel told her firmly, with the assurance of a father who had done whatever was necessary to protect his daughter. Lucia, for her part, seemed to flourish in this new environment of peace and stability. With each passing day, his confidence grew and his laughter became more frequent. She looked happy and carefree, a child who had left behind the fear and uncertainty that had tormented her for so long. One afternoon, while Gabriel and Lucia were playing in the nearby park, the girl asked him a question that took him by surprise. "Why did you decide to help me that day, Gabriel?" he asked with an innocent but deep curiosity. Gabriel was silent for a moment, searching for the right answer. Finally, he smiled at her and replied, "Because it was the right thing to do, Lucia. Sometimes, even if we don't really know why, We feel that we must do something. And that day, I knew I couldn't sit idly by. The girl nodded, as if she understood something beyond her age. In his expression, Gabriel saw a flash of maturity, as if that experience had given him a special perspective on kindness and courage. As the days went by, Daniel organized a small celebration in honor of Gabriel, something simple and familiar. He invited some people close to him, who also thanked him from the bottom of their hearts for what Gabriel had done for his family. In the late afternoon, Daniel raised a glass and dedicated a few words in his honor. Gabriel, when we met you, you were just passing through, but now you are part of our lives. Not only did you give us peace of mind and security, but you showed us the courage to listen to the heart. Thank you for being that example for Lucia and me, for teaching us that there is always room for kindness, even in the most unexpected moments. Family and friends toasted in his honor, and Gabriel, though modest, couldn't help but be deeply moved. She knew that her life had changed because of that relationship. That family had given her a renewed purpose, one that was not only to protect, but also to be part of something bigger. As time went on, Gabriel began to share more stories with Lucia and Daniel, revealing parts of his past that he had kept to himself. He talked about his days in the military, about the difficult times and the difficult decisions he had had to make. Daniel listened to him with interest, while Lucia looked at him with admiration, as if each story were a window to the courage she always saw in him. One afternoon, after one of these talks, Daniel approached Gabriel. "I think you found something important here," he said with a look of understanding. "Maybe Lucia is not the only one who needed someone in her life. Maybe you were looking for something too." Gabriel nodded, acknowledging that Daniel was right. It wasn't just about rescuing Lucia that day in the restaurant. It was also about rescuing a part of himself, one that he had felt lost in everyday life. The connection with Lucia and Daniel had filled a void that I hadn't known how to fill for a long time. The years passed, and Gabriel remained close to the family, accompanying Lucia in every important step of her life. He was present on his birthdays, in his school achievements, and in every moment he needed someone to remind him that he was strong and capable of facing any challenge. Through each of those moments, Gabriel and Lucia strengthened a bond that did not require words to understand its depth. Lucia grew up knowing that life had given her someone special, a protector and friend, someone who had transformed her life forever in a single instant of courage and compassion. And Gabriel, in turn, found in that relationship the reason and purpose he had been unknowingly seeking. That simple act of intervening, of not ignoring a disturbing situation in a restaurant, had been the beginning of a transformation that would guide him for the rest of his life. She knew that even if she wasn't her blood daughter, she would always be there for Lucia, as part of her life and as a constant reminder of the power of a simple decision. As time went on, the relationship between Gabriel, Lucia, and Daniel became deeper and more solid. Lucia, now a teenager, saw Gabriel not only as the man who had saved her that day at the restaurant, but as a mentor and father figure. Although Daniel was a devoted father and was always present, Gabriel brought something unique to the table, a perspective on life, the value and importance of helping others. One afternoon, while they were walking in the park, Lucia dared to ask him something she had been thinking about for a long time. "Gabriel, have you ever regretted what you did? To have gotten you into my life and Dad's, I mean." Gabriel looked at her with a serene smile and shook his head. "Never, Lucia. Life has taught me that acts of kindness, no matter how small, can change the course of things. That decision, at that moment, brought me and your dad. How could I regret something that has given me so much?" Lucia smiled, moved. She knew that Gabriel would always be by her side, not only as a protector, but also as someone who would remind her of the importance of compassion and courage. Daniel, for his part, watched as Gabriel had transformed his daughter's life. The peace he had sought for her so much became a reality with each day Gabriel spent with them, with each deep conversation they shared, and with every moment he taught her about courage and perseverance. Over time, Gabriel began to get involved in community activities with Lucia, working on youth aid programs. Inspired by his experience, he wanted to be a source of support for other boys who, like Lucia, needed a helping hand and guidance. Lucia also got involved, feeling motivated by Gabriel's example and hoping to pass on to others what she had learned. One night, after a day at the community center, Lucia confessed to Gabriel that she had decided her path in life. "I want to be a social worker," she said with a mixture of shyness and pride. "I want to help other children like you helped me. I want to be that person who reminds them that they can overcome anything." Gabriel felt immense pride when he listened to her. He knew that the seed of that desire had emerged from their shared experience, and that Lucia had found a purpose that, in some way, connected them even more deeply. He hugged her, recognizing in her the strength and kindness he had seen from day one. In the years that followed, Gabriel remained close to Lucia as she progressed in her studies and became a passionate and committed young woman. Daniel, proud of the path his daughter had chosen, was always silently grateful for the day Gabriel intervened in their lives. Finally, when Lucia graduated, she organized a small thank you ceremony in which she gathered her loved ones and important people in her life. When it was time to speak, Lucia took the microphone and looked at Gabriel in the crowd, her eyes shining with excitement. "Today I want to thank my dad, who was always by my side, and someone very special who decided to help me at a time when I needed it most," she said, her voice trembling with gratitude. "Gabriel, you not only saved me, but you gave me a direction, a reason to help others as you helped me. This achievement is as much yours as it is mine." Lucia's words resonated in Gabriel's heart, and he felt how all the moments they had shared were summed up in that instant of recognition and love. He knew that he had fulfilled his mission, that his presence had left an indelible mark on Lucia's life. That day, as the celebration continued and friends and family congratulated Lucia, Gabriel knew that while the journey that brought them together began as an impulsive act of compassion, it was now something much bigger, a relationship of love, respect, and gratitude that would last forever. After the ceremony, while the guests said goodbye and the house returned to an atmosphere of calm, Lucia and Gabriel sat together on the porch, sharing a moment in silence under the starry sky. Daniel joined them, taking a seat next to them and looking at his daughter with pride. "I think I can now say that I have two parents," Lucia said suddenly, looking at them both. "Dad, you have always been there for me, taking care of me and supporting me in everything. And Gabriel, you gave me strength when I needed it most and showed me that goodness exists in the most unexpected places." Daniel smiled, excited, and placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "I couldn't agree more. I didn't know what we needed that day at the restaurant, but now I see that that moment was the beginning of something that changed our lives." Gabriel, visibly moved, took a deep breath to control the emotion he felt in his chest. "The truth is that you changed me too," he admitted, looking at Lucia and Daniel. "After so many years of service, I thought I had lost something, a part of me that I had left on some battlefield. But when I met you, I remembered how important it is to have a real connection, to start a family, even if it is not by blood." Lucia smiled, her expression reflecting the gratitude and love she felt for Gabriel. "So, we are united by that choice. You saved me, and I want to be to others what you have been to me." As the night wore on, the trio shared laughter and memories, talking about how life had given them a second chance to form bonds that were as deep as they were unpredictable. Gabriel, who had previously felt lonely and disconnected, now knew that he had found his place in Lucia and Daniel's lives. At the end of the night, Gabriel said goodbye, but not without promising that he would continue to be a constant presence. The years that had passed had consolidated a relationship that did not require words to understand its meaning. Over time, Gabriel and Lucia continued to work together at the community center, developing programs to help youth and families in difficult situations. The story of Lucia and Gabriel became an inspiration for all those who knew them, especially for those who saw in them an example of how an act of kindness can trigger a chain of significant changes in the lives of others. Lucia, with her dedication and empathy, followed in Gabriel's footsteps, guided by the lesson he had taught her, that courage and compassion can transform lives. His work became increasingly recognized, and he soon began sharing his story at conferences and events, encouraging others not to ignore their intuition and to help when they saw a need. One afternoon, after one of these events, Lucia approached Gabriel and gave him a small gift. Inside a wooden box, Gabriel found a medal with the inscription, "Whoever saves a life, saves the whole world." Gabriel held her in his hands, recognizing the symbolic weight of those words, and looked at Lucia, feeling the deep pride and love that united them. "Lucia, you gave me more than I gave you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Your strength and your desire to help others is the greatest gift anyone could give me." Lucia smiled, gently touching Gabriel's shoulder. "I'm just giving back what you gave me that day and what you continue to give me every day." That moment was a perfect closure for both of them. Although their paths had begun under unexpected circumstances, the bond they formed had grown into an unbreakable relationship. Together they continued to work, confident that their story could inspire many more. And so, Gabriel found in that family a second chance, a life full of meaning and purpose. He knew that even though life was always unpredictable, he had found something he had never expected, a family that loved him, valued him, and to whom he was deeply committed. The journey he began in that restaurant had changed the course of their lives forever, and Gabriel finally felt at peace, knowing that through his decision to intervene, he had saved not only Lucia, but also himself. As the years passed, Gabriel, Lucia, and Daniel kept their relationship strong and stable, sharing important moments and supporting each other at every stage of their lives. Lucia, already an adult woman, dedicated her life to social work, always inspired by Gabriel's heroic act and by her father's love and dedication. One day, while Gabriel was at home reviewing some documents, he received an unexpected call. It was Lucia. Her voice sounded excited and at the same time nervous. "Gabriel, I need you to come to Dad's house tonight. It's important, and I want you to be here," she said, hinting that she had something special to share. That night, Gabriel arrived at Daniel's house with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. As he entered, he found Lucia and Daniel waiting for him in the living room, surrounded by some close friends and family. Lucia walked up to him and held his hands, her eyes shining and a warm smile. "Gabriel, you have been a crucial figure in my life," Lucia began, looking at him with a depth that only years of shared experiences could reflect. "You showed me what kindness, courage, and the importance of helping others mean. Today, I want you to be part of another important step." Gabriel looked at her, not yet knowing what she was about to say. Lucia took a deep breath and continued. "I'm getting married, and I want you to walk me down the aisle with Dad. You are like a second father to me, and I couldn't imagine this day without you by my side." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat, deeply moved by Lucia's request. He looked at Daniel, who smiled at him with a mixture of pride and gratitude. "You've long been part of our family, Gabriel," Daniel said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Lucia and I can't imagine this moment without you." With tears in his eyes and a sincere smile, Gabriel nodded. He knew that this was an immense honor, and that on this day at the restaurant his life had taken a course he had never anticipated, one that had led him to a relationship as deep and meaningful as this one. The wedding day arrived with a clear sky and a gentle breeze. Gabriel, dressed in a suit, was next to Daniel, preparing to accompany Lucia on her big day. When Lucia appeared in her white dress, radiant and full of emotion, Gabriel and Daniel looked at her with pride and love. As they walked down the aisle, one on each side of it, Gabriel felt that each step was a testament to the life they had built together. In that instant, the memories of that first meeting at the restaurant flashed through his mind, the frightened girl who needed help, the impulse that led him to intervene, and everything that had come out of that decision. Lucia, between her two parents, felt immense peace and joy. She knew that this moment was the result of the compassion, courage, and love of those who had cared for her, and a testimony that relationships forged in times of need could become the strongest and most lasting bonds. When they reached the altar, Lucia turned to both of them and hugged them, murmuring a "thank you" full of gratitude and emotion. Then, as she made her way to her future husband, Gabriel and Daniel exchanged a look of pride and satisfaction, knowing that they had fulfilled their promise to protect and guide Lucia. After the ceremony, at the reception, Lucia gave a speech of thanks. "I'm here today because of two amazing men," he began, looking at Gabriel and Daniel fondly. my father, who always gave me love and protection, and Gabriel, who taught me that acts of kindness can change lives forever. Thanks to you, I am here, safe and happy, ready to start this new chapter." The guests applauded, and Gabriel, once again, felt deeply grateful for the role that life had given him in Lucia's story. She knew that the connection she had built with her and Daniel had no end. The shared moments, the lessons, and the love they had for each other would always be a fundamental part of their lives. At the end of the night, as the guests began to say goodbye, Lucia and Gabriel shared one last moment together. "No matter where life takes me, Gabriel," she told him, holding his hand, "you will always be my hero and my family." Gabriel nodded, knowing that their paths would always be intertwined. That day at the restaurant had been just the beginning of a story that would continue to fill them with purpose and togetherness, reminding them both that acts of love and courage have the power to transcend, to build families and to transform lives forever. And so Gabriel, Lucia, and Daniel moved on, knowing that even though circumstances had brought them together unexpectedly, their relationship was a constant choice, a story of love and gratitude that would continue to unite them forever. After the wedding, Lucia's life moved forward with a new energy, as she continued her career helping families and young people in vulnerable situations. Every step he took was a kind of homage to Gabriel, to the man who had taught him that a single decision, a simple choice to do good, could change the course of a life. Gabriel, in turn, continued to maintain a constant presence in Lucia and Daniel's lives, feeling that the role of mentor and close friend was now one of the most meaningful missions of his life. Over time, Lucia and her husband began to think about starting a family of their own. The news of her first pregnancy filled everyone with joy, especially Gabriel, who was excited to know that she would now be a part of the lives of a new generation. The day Lucia told him the news, her eyes were shining with emotion. "Gabriel, I hope this baby can have someone in his life as strong and generous as you," she said, taking his hand. "I hope you can teach him everything you taught me." Gabriel's words left him speechless for a moment, deeply moved by the trust and affection she continued to place in him. He promised her that he would be present, and that he would always have a place in his life and that of his family. Lucia knew that Gabriel would keep that promise, and that the same love and protection he had given her would now be a part of her son's life. When the baby was born, a strong, healthy boy they named Tomas, Gabriel was one of the first to visit Lucia and her husband in the hospital. Holding Tomas for the first time, he felt the connection to this family deepen even more. He looked at Lucia, who was smiling from the bed, and said in a whisper, "I promised to be here for him, as I was for you." As Thomas grew older, Gabriel formed a special bond with him. They would spend hours together, with Gabriel teaching her everything from the values of kindness and respect to lessons in courage and perseverance. For Tomas, Gabriel was much more than an adoptive grandfather. He was a source of inspiration and unconditional love. And as he grew older, Thomas listened in awe to the stories of how Gabriel had saved his mother, of how a single act of bravery had changed the fate of his family. One day, when Tomas was old enough to understand, Gabriel told him the story of that day in the restaurant, how his instinct told him that something was not right, and how that led him to intervene. "Sometimes life gives us the opportunity to make a difference, Thomas," he told him. "And while we don't always know where that decision will take us, if we listen to our hearts, we'll always be on the right track." Thomas nodded, his eyes full of admiration for Gabriel. "I want to be like you, Gabriel. I want to be someone who helps others." Gabriel smiled, feeling his legacy of kindness and courage passed on to a new generation, strengthening the promise of a life guided by principle and love. As the years passed, Gabriel, Lucia, Daniel, and Thomas formed a solid, close-knit family, a family that had been woven from the courage and compassion of a man who had decided not to ignore his intuition at a crucial moment. Despite the time, the love and gratitude between them did not diminish. On the contrary, they deepened with each new chapter they lived together. In his old age, when Gabriel looked at Lucia and Thomas, he felt at peace, knowing that his life had been meaningful. He had kept his promise to protect and guide Lucia, and in the process, he had found something much bigger than he had ever expected. A family, A family that would remember him as the man who taught them the power of a single act of kindness. In his last days, Gabriel received visits from Lucia, Daniel, and Thomas. They were all around his bed, holding his hands and filling the room with the love they had shared over the years. Lucia leaned over to him, whispering words full of gratitude and eternal love. "Gabriel, thank you for everything. You gave us a life of peace, love, and hope. You will always be our hero." Gabriel, with one last smile and his eyes shining with pride, nodded softly, knowing that his legacy would continue in the hearts of those he had loved so much. With that certainty, he said goodbye, in peace, knowing that his life had made a deep and lasting difference. And so, the love, compassion, and courage Gabriel had shown endured, passed down from generation to generation, reminding his family and all who would listen to his story that, deep down, it is acts of kindness and courage that build a truly meaningful life. After Gabriel's departure, his absence left a deep void in the hearts of Lucia, Daniel, and Thomas. However, his memory remained alive in every corner of the house and in every story they shared about him. For Lucia, Gabriel's lesson was clear. A life dedicated to helping others, even in the most ordinary moments, had an impact that extended far beyond his physical presence. Lucia and Daniel decided to honor Gabriel's legacy in a special way. With the support of the community, they founded the Gabriel Torres Help Center, a place dedicated to young people and families in vulnerable situations, exactly the kind of people Gabriel would have wanted to support. The center offered orientation, workshops, and mentoring programs for those looking for a fresh start and a safe space to grow. It was Lucia's dream come true, a mission inspired by the kindness and courage Gabriel had taught her. Thomas, who had grown up under Gabriel's influence, joined the center as a volunteer. Remembering the words and teachings of his grandfather Gabriel, he passionately dedicated himself to inspiring other young people. She would tell them stories about how their grandfather had changed their mother's life, how a single act of bravery could rewrite the fate of an entire family. Gabriel's example resonated in every piece of advice he offered, and his legacy continued to motivate people not to ignore their intuition and to reach out a helping hand when needed. Over time, the Gabriel Torres Help Center became a symbol of hope in the community. Murals on the walls of the building depicted scenes of compassion, kindness, and bravery, and upon entering, visitors could see a plaque with a phrase that resonated in the spirit of the place: "An act of kindness can change the course of a life." Lucia, now a mature woman, continued to lead the center, ensuring that Gabriel's legacy remained intact and that her vision remained the driving force behind each project. Every time she entered the center and saw the young people who were there, she felt that Gabriel was present, accompanying and guiding her in every decision, in every word of encouragement he offered. One day, Tomas organized a ceremony in honor of the center's anniversary. Friends, family, and community members gathered to remember Gabriel and celebrate the difference he had made in their lives. When he took the floor, Tomas addressed those present with a firm voice full of emotion. "Today we celebrate not only the legacy of a great man, but also the promise that his spirit lives on in each of us. My grandfather Gabriel taught us that no matter how small we feel or how big the challenges, we always have the power to help, to do good, and to change the world through our actions." The audience listened in silence, moved by Thomas's words and by the story of a man who had transformed the life of a young girl and, eventually, an entire community. Among the attendees, some young people who had received help from the center also shared their experiences, expressing how Gabriel's example had given them the strength to overcome their own obstacles. After the ceremony, Lucia and Thomas planted a tree in the center's garden, an oak tree that symbolized the deep roots and continued growth of Gabriel's legacy. As they placed the last shovel of dirt, Lucia whispered, "Thank you, Gabriel, for everything you gave us. I promise you that your light will continue to guide every person who walks through these doors." Over the years, the center flourished, and Gabriel's story became a local legend, a story that was passed down from generation to generation. Young and old came to the center for inspiration and support, always guided by the spirit of kindness and courage that Gabriel had left. Thus, the legacy of Gabriel Torres not only endured in the family he helped build, but extended to hundreds of people who found in his story a reason to believe in the goodness and power of a selfless decision. For Lucia, Daniel, and Thomas, Gabriel's life was proof that love and compassion could transcend time, and that even if someone left, his influence could continue to transform lives, generate hope, and remind everyone that in each of us there is the potential to do good. The tree that Lucia and Thomas planted in his honor grew strong and robust, its branches extending into the sky, as a living symbol of Gabriel's life and the promise of his eternal legacy. Over time, the oak tree planted in Gabriel's honor became a central symbol of the Gabriel Torres Help Center. Each spring, its branches were filled with strong green leaves, and its shade offered a quiet refuge to those who came to the center for help and guidance. It was a special place where visitors, young and old, could sit, reflect, and feel the calm that the tree transmitted, as if Gabriel's spirit was preserved in each leaf and branch. Lucia, who now ran the center alongside Tomas, started an annual tradition. Each year, the anniversary of the founding was celebrated around the oak tree, where people shared stories of how the center had transformed their lives. Community members and young people who had passed through the center gathered under the tree, some expressing gratitude, others simply reflecting on Gabriel's impact and his legacy of kindness. That celebration became a long-awaited event, where vows to continue their work and to inspire each other were renewed. One afternoon, on the anniversary of the center's opening, Lucia decided to tell Gabriel's full story to the assembled audience, many of whom knew only fragments of the story. In a firm, emotional voice, she recounted how one man had changed his life in a single act of bravery in a restaurant, how that intervention had transformed his destiny, and how, over time, the relationship between them had become the nucleus of a family. The attendees listened attentively, some moved to tears, as they discovered Gabriel's profound impact on Lucia's life and on all of them. "My life wouldn't be the same without him," Lucia concluded, looking up at the tree and clearly remembering every moment she had shared with Gabriel. "He taught us that while one may feel lonely or small in the face of life, a single act of compassion can create change that transcends generations. That is the true power of love and kindness." Thomas took the floor after his mother, sharing what Gabriel had meant to him and the influence he had had on his formation. "He always told us to listen to our hearts and do the right thing, even when it was difficult. Now, whenever someone needs help, I think about what he would do, and that lesson continues to guide me every step of the way." At the end of the ceremony, everyone present participated in a symbolic activity. Each person wrote a word or phrase of thanks on a small card and hung it on the branches of the oak tree. It was a tribute to Gabriel, a forest of messages full of gratitude, hope, and promises of kindness that decorated the tree each year. Over time, the branches were filled with these memories, and the tree became a living monument to Gabriel's legacy. The years continued to pass, and the Gabriel Torres Help Center expanded, offering more programs and resources to the community. Lucia and Tomas began to form a team of mentors, people who had passed through the center and who wanted to give back to others the support they had received. Soon Gabriel's influence reached neighboring communities, and other cities began to establish centers inspired by his example. Lucia, who felt the weight of the responsibility of continuing this legacy, was filled with satisfaction to see how Gabriel's story was still alive. "Each of us has the potential to do good, to be that light that someone needs," he told the mentors. Gabriel didn't seek recognition, he just followed his instinct and his heart. That is the example we must follow. In her old age, Lucia sat under the oak tree every afternoon, reading the messages that visitors hung on the branches and remembering Gabriel with love. For her, he would always be present, not only in the memories, but in the work he had built and in the lives he had touched. Finally, when Lucia left this world, Thomas continued the work with the same devotion as she did. Gabriel's center and tree became a family legacy, a promise of kindness and compassion that was passed down from generation to generation. Gabriel and Lucia's story continued to inspire thousands, and the center thrived as a refuge for those who needed support and guidance in their lives. Thus, Gabriel's spirit continued to flourish, growing like the branches of the oak tree that he never got to see, but which was now a living symbol of the hope, courage, and compassion that one man had left in the world. Decades later, the Gabriel Torres Help Center was still a place of hope and transformation. The story of Gabriel, Lucia, and that act of kindness had become a local legend, passed down from generation to generation, inspiring all those who walked through the doors of the center. Visitors came from afar to find help and comfort, fueled by the promise of a place that offered a second chance, just as Gabriel had done for Lucia so many years ago. The oak tree stood majestically in the center of the garden, its branches thick and leafy, full of messages of gratitude and hope. Over the years, the tree had grown to become imposing, with deep roots that represented Gabriel's legacy, and each spring, its green leaves reminded of the life and strength he had left in this world. For the community, the holm oak was much more than a tree. It was a living reminder of the ability to change lives with a single act of love. Thomas, now older, continued the work of his mother and Gabriel with dedication. Although times had changed, the center maintained its original essence, a place where anyone could find support, understanding, and a new path. One afternoon, while contemplating the tree and reminiscing about his family's history, Thomas decided to organize a special ceremony in honor of the centenary of Gabriel, who, despite having left many years earlier, was still a constant presence in every corner of the center. On the day of the ceremony, the community gathered around the oak tree. Families, friends, and people who had once found refuge at the center shared stories about how their lives had been changed by Gabriel's kindness and his family's work. Among the attendees were children, young and old, all united by the legacy of compassion that Gabriel had unknowingly sown. At one point in the ceremony, Thomas took the floor and, looking into the faces of the people around him, recalled Gabriel's words, "An act of kindness can change the course of a life." With a firm voice, he added, "Each one of you is part of that act. Every story of hope, every person who found a second chance here, is the reflection of a legacy that will continue as long as we continue to believe in kindness and the power to help others." Then, Thomas invited the attendees to do the same thing that was done every year: hang their messages on the branches of the oak tree. That afternoon, the tree was filled with cards and colored ribbons, a forest of words of gratitude that fluttered in the wind. And as everyone watched in silence, the branches seemed to spread out even further, as if the oak itself responded to the love and gratitude that surrounded it. At the end of the ceremony, Thomas stood in the garden, alone, watching the leaves swaying gently in the evening light. With a nostalgic smile, he remembered Gabriel and his mother, and felt a deep peace. He knew that even though they were no longer physically there, their spirit lived on in every person who had found comfort and hope at the center. He knew that his life, and that of so many others, had been transformed by an act of bravery that Gabriel never imagined would have such an impact. The center and the oak tree would continue to be there, growing and thriving, as an eternal symbol of the power of compassion. Thus the legacy of Gabriel, Lucia, and Daniel would continue to flourish, transcending time, in every life touched, in every person inspired to do good, and in every heart that would find refuge under the shade of the oak tree. And so, in that garden full of life, surrounded by gratitude and love, Gabriel's spirit remained forever, like a light that never went out, and like a promise that good, even in the simplest acts, always endures.